I could see the dirt and the sand and everything, but I was sucked into the story. When I went to the Middle East for the first time, it felt so different setting foot. When I was in the plane, it was myself and some others before we stepped foot in Israel, because we landed in Tel Aviv at that time. And before I stepped foot in Tel Aviv, I felt a strong reverence, right? I mean, I was knocked out. I was conked out. Everybody else was a bit itchy, nervous. I was kind of knocked out, and I kind of woke up, and a couple other, brothers, we prayed together because we did not want to defile and to the defilement of Israel. We didn't want to do that, so we kind of cleared our minds and thoughts, and it was weird, but it was spontaneous. When we stepped foot on that land, there's a notable change within a person, right? Especially when you're thinking about the Messiah, you're thinking about the Father, and you know that land is his land, God's land, which is what he reminds people of in the book of Joel. It specifically states, God looked down on his land and remembered his land and pitied the people. That's exactly what it says in the book of Joel. He remembered his land and pitied the people. And it was a very different time, but that began a very different walk in my life. Then when we went to Iraq, it was a dominating force. It's a force in that area in Iraq. It was at the time. And it was strong. I don't know how many people talk about this, but at night in Iraq, you felt just insecure. You also felt your flesh was almost ignited with a type of aggression, right, that you didn't feel anywhere else. And this happens in several places in the Middle East to this very day. I personally believe it's because it's something underneath those lands that is, this is a spiritual essence or spiritual happening. But it was a very different experience. And then ironically, when you come back to the U.S., one of the first things we all agreed, it was quite a few of us. One of the first things we agreed, it was good to be back home, right? But it was also uncertainty. Uncertainty. I say that because when you have a clear enemy, that's one thing. When you come back to a place and you don't know who your enemy is, that's uncertainty. When you don't know who to trust, that's uncertainty. That's chaos. It's just like those of you who ever went to Germany and then after spending time in Germany coming back to the U.S., you're so glad to be home, but it's chaos. It's chaos. And then when you know it, as soon as you step foot on the ground, the temptations try to get you back into what you were into before you left. It's the way this land is. And every single place has some sort of principality or power over it. During the manifestation of the beast, these principalities and powers are going to reveal themselves. That means in every province of a land, kind of like land ownership, you have a spirit running that place. You ever go from state to state, you perceive and you have a different spiritual insight. With every place you go to, it's different. It's almost like entering into one person's home and you feel peace. You enter into another person's home, you feel threatened. You enter into another person's home, you feel joyful, right? You enter into another person's home and you exercise massive restraint. Each one is governed by a spirit. If you pay attention to that, you'll never be blindsided. Most of you, right? Now, if you're academic, because academics can spoil you, they can blind you deeply. And what academics do is they cause you to think about every situation, right? But if you don't think about every situation, trying to deduce everything logically, you have insight spiritually. That's automatic with you. I had to cast away some academic theories, thoughts, and methods because they were quite blinding. Never be blindsided, folks, by what this world has to offer. All right? I want you to remember something before I start reading here. Remember something. Everybody on earth is created. You may not know who everybody is. You may not know the purpose of everybody. But your brothers and your sisters are the point of this earth. This earth was made for them. You know that, don't you? Do you guys know that? A lot of people don't know that. This earth was made for the children of God to go through this process. This earth was not made to be some experimental place. One of the alternative hybrid gospels out there, it does incorporate Zechariah Sitchin's thesis with, or his books, his writings. It mixes that with the gospel, and it reinterprets the word of God according to the knowledge of Zechariah Sitchin. I hope that you guys are not making that mistake. It's very easy to make, right? Because it's so comfortable to believe in plausibilities. But I'm challenging you, don't get comfortable with anything man gives you. It's almost like being comfortable with what Satan gives you. All of us understand that the things that try to destroy you in life, you received them openly, didn't you? They were for good. Kind of like medication. It begins as a good thing, doesn't it? But then it can take over and utterly ruin people. It has ruined a lot of people. Medicine has. Medicine has ruined a lot of people's lives. It's a very tough thing, very sad thing to talk about. I told you guys what I did. But it has ruined people's lives. It causes a chemical change in the body, chemical dependency, which is very real. It's not of the mind. It is real. And it can ruin people's lives, but it doesn't begin that way. It begins as a good thing, as a solution. So understand this. What man has as a solution is often received as good news, but then over time, it destroys you from the inside out. So please remember that. Our Father in heaven never does anything like that. Never. He's very straightforward. He really is. But just understand that about the word. World. So at this time, you don't find yourself in one of those mental traps. A lot of people have themselves in a mental trap. Nothing is touching them. Nothing is bothering them. But mentally, they're trapped in a prison they can't escape from. You're going to be on guard for this, so that you may be of use to others. You know the importance about you stepping foot in the kingdom and having Christ in you? You know what the importance of that is in my life and in everybody else's life? If you're in right standing with the Messiah, you can be of help to everyone around you. If you're not in right standing with the Messiah, you can only help those things that will most certainly die. And how many people have spent all their lives trying to improve something that's going to be wiped away from all memory anyway? Think about that. It's kind of like about 10 years ago. How many of you got, you for some reason, this happened all over the earth, but for some reason, if you're a believer, you had this going on in your life, you had to. But for some reason, all of a sudden, there were certain things that you used to do. You didn't do them anymore because you said to yourselves, what's the use? How many of you have done that? How many of you started to look around and you said, what's the use of pursuing this or doing this? No, I need to get right with the Lord and begin his work. All this other stuff is about to die. Did anybody get that inkling about, it's about 10 years ago. Anybody start thinking about that about 10 years ago? It was about 10 years to this very day. That thought hit a lot of people. They began to think, all this is going to be destroyed. I'm not going to invest myself in something that's going to burn up anyway. Listen, that you would have no idea of surveys that were taken to find this out, right? When surveys were taken of this one question, hundreds of millions of people were excitedly answering that question as a resounding yes. And they couldn't believe that somebody would question that one question really lit some people up. And they said, oh, my Lord, it's not just me. You're talking about hundreds of millions of people. And that was just from the small lot that was actually surveyed. We're not talking about surveying 10,000 and then estimating for 8-point-some billion. That's not what we're talking. We're talking about surveying hundreds of millions of people, all of them. And the majority of them, I'd say about over 95%, said yes. Yes. And it was disturbing people's work. People shifted jobs. They started to think about things very differently. Some people downsized in their lives and everything else. They couldn't understand why, but it hit all at once. And I believe that was a resounding message of a truth that none of us we really don't want that truth to be a real thing, because it's very difficult to comprehend with the type of mindset that we have often in the world, right? But nevertheless, it affected so many at one point. So many. Keep that in mind this very day. Because those were the days the Lord began to do a work, open work with a lot of believers. He changed the course of so many lives. And he did that all at one time. There is no such thing as a coincidence with that high of an amount of people all at one time having that same thought. And then when they answered yes, not only did they answer yes, but often in a survey, right? Here's how you gauge somebody's excitement. You have a person answer yes or no, but then you put a comment box or remarks box down right below it. Every single last one of them were filled up. It was a maximum of 500 words. And just about all of them ran to the very last piece. And you could tell that there were more keystrokes in those boxes, meaning people overtyped to hand it back up and do it again. You can capture the overstrikes. It was an amazing thing. So listen, the Lord he starts speaking to us then, in a very different way. And now, it seems, a new set of communications are being perceived by so many. Now, it takes, if you're one of those people that can put these things to word, then put it to word and you'll see what I'm saying. But in time, I know I'm certainly going to do it, because I know it's hit at least probably about 100% now. I'd say about 100% now. But the Lord is preparing us all at one time. Listen, that only happens for one reason. If you in the Old Testament, God did not prepare everybody at one time. That's not what he did. He did a province here because he was changing that province. He did a province here because he was changing that province. But when the Lord, every single time the Lord prepares all people at one time, and you can go back through history. And if you become you start looking at history and study people in history, as far as what was written, what was accepted. If you look at a popular newspaper, that means people were actually reading it, right? So that means it was circulating to a lot of people. If you look at an unpopular newspaper, nobody was reading it, right? So you can tell how many people were drawn to specific things based upon what was in those newspapers, right? You go back in history and you start to see a resounding message that was going out to humanity for the time we live in right now. Right now. And what I'm asking you is this. Pay attention to those spiritual things and try not to be blinded by the tool set of academia that the world has given you. Right? Because many of you have had the sensation that your academics have caused you to be numb in places where you should not be numb. Absolutely and utterly no feeling behind specific things. And you know that has a spiritual root. Right? Academics will also cause you to defend yourself and your knowledge, because anything a man labors for has value to that man. And so when you build up your academic scorecard, You'll find yourself having a habit of defending it. Okay, so be careful with those things and try not to let it cloud your spiritual judgment and insight and instruction. Because we're in very different times here. And I'm telling you, things are so incredibly close that please don't get caught up in foolishness. Right? Many of you right now, I'm going to say this. You know you're in a mode now, Satan is desperate. He wants to keep you away from the truth. Some of you gentlemen are getting into the truth. That means what you have been wanting for a long time that you have kind of forgotten about is going to approach you. That goes for you two ladies. If I were you, I would decline just about everything for a small season so that the Lord can finish walking you where you need to be walked to, because the distraction is coming by way of your fellow man, normally in the opposite sex, and I'm talking about relationships and things like that. They will come at a time, right, and blow your mind at a time when you're about to have a spiritual breakthrough. Please be careful and watch that. These are tactics of Satan. He does this all the time, and he's doing it right now. So be wary of that, please. And just do your best. Don't be burdened by not being perfect. A perfect fruit, a perfect banana is not a banana without any rotten spots on it. A perfect banana is a banana. A perfect apple is an apple. An imperfect banana would be a banana with strawberries, with a strawberry, skin on it. That's imperfect. That's hybrid. In the Bible, it says Satan is filled with great rage, knowing that he has but a short time. He's going to throw everything he knows how to throw at you. Listen, we can only be drawn away and tempted of our own lusts. Guess who knows every single lust you have? He's the master of human flesh. You know who that is? The dragon. He knows exactly how your flesh operates. Be careful. Somebody says, even for people who are married, that always happens. But folks, you listen to me. I'm telling you to stay in your spiritual spot. Don't give up your prayer closet. That's what I'm telling you. Don't allow anything to remove the time you have allotted for you and your Father. Don't do that, because if you invite complications into your life right now, you may not get back to the Word. You guys hear me okay? You got to be careful of that. He's going to throw everything he can at you. Oh, he didn't like this conversation. I can tell it. I can always perceive that. Anyway, I hope that you guys are mindful of that. You know what? I have just absolutely blown the Luke study. I know there's darkness all around me, right? You can walk in a rebuke. Anybody know how to do that? A rebuke is to stand against something. You can walk with Christ and stand against darkness by walking with Christ. Do you understand? So as long as you agree and walk with Christ, you are rebuking everything around you. The Lord said, if you're obedient, if you listen to him, he'll take care of Satan for you. So what do you want? You want to sit up there and fight with him for the rest of your days and come back with a bunch of battle scars? Or would you rather the power of the Messiah to defeat darkness everywhere it is in your life? Because I don't know about you. The real fight we're in is for our brothers and our sisters, to invest time and love in them, to assist them. I don't have time for Satan. Do you? I don't have time for him. My mind is focused upon those like yourselves, those who are like me. That's where my heart is, in the gospel's work. That's the gospel, the good news. When you tell someone, hey, I know you feel awful for what you did, but Christ made a way so that you can go all the way back home. That's the gospel, the good news. I don't have time to deal with Satan and all of his antics he uses over and over and over again. The Lord has defeated him and stood all power against him. So if I be in the shadow of the Messiah, I'm not going to have to deal with Satan. He can still whisper from the weeds, but I do not have to entertain him. I'll resist him at every turn. To resist him is not to conversate with him. Don't have a conversation with him. Don't look up his interests. Don't get on his level, but continue to walk behind Christ, that your life may flourish, your spiritual life. See, you're about to change forms. Hope you know that. That's going to be a painful day for a lot of people because they really don't believe that they're going to continue after this. And some of those people may be going to church, but they don't understand who you really are. No one has ever seen. Just like what your real name is, no one knows. And your flesh is not mysterious. It will be absolutely undone, or it will be destroyed and go back to the earth from which it came. But your spirit is eternal. And where you spend your eternity matters. Because you don't leave this world and go into nothingness. There is no escape for anybody. Death is not an escape because the redeemed need not escape. Anybody out there in suicide is high. Listen to me carefully. If you take control over your own life right now and end it, you don't end your life. You're going to find out painfully you have continued into a different realm without direction, without guidance, without warmth. Don't do that. Death is not an escape. That is Satan's illusion to cause you to do the unthinkable. And if you're contemplating suicide, Satan is whispering into your ear. He knows everything is eternal. He knows this. He knows you're going to pass from this plane instantly into another without breaks. That's why he's whispering. Because if you're contemplating suicide, you're listening to him. You're not listening to the one who created you. All your troubles have a purpose. And that purpose is not bad. That purpose is for your absolute freedom. That nothing be held back from you as you enter into the kingdom. Because you will have a crown. Nobody's just going to get in by the seat of their pants. See, we have a job to do, don't we? The redeemed of the Lord have a job to do. Yes, we're still in a process. But just how many can we bring along the way? We understand where they are. All we have to do is get out of the seat of denial and stop thinking that we never did anything wrong. Stand up in truth and point to somebody who's doing the unthinkable and say, you know what? You are me and I am you. But now I have Christ. And the only difference between me and you, the one over there sinning, and I'm standing over here telling you about the gospel, the only difference is I know the Messiah now. That's the only difference. The barrier must be torn down. People right now think they have to be perfect before they go to church. The Lord is not after the perfect, but the imperfect, the bound and the lame, the wounded and the sick. That's who he's after, and that's who the gospel's for. The good news is to be given to those who have nothing but bad news. Over the years, we've got that twisted and enjoyed a life of just serving each other. So let the works begin. Let's do servitude not based in humanity's construct of servitude, but based upon our Father's calling in our lives. That's the only way you'll ever stand up spiritually to become who you are destined to be, predestined to be. And the Lord has already walked out your steps. That's why it's written, the steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. And what makes one righteous? Jesus does. That's why it's written, you are the righteousness of Christ. You have achieved no righteousness of your own, but are appointed righteousness through the blood of the Lamb and your acceptance of it. So be strengthened with the truth. The truth is strength. It'll never make you weak. And let the works begin.